Of all the bomb cases that you worked on, which do you think, in your personal opinion, was the most significant?
Well, to me personally, it was the Oklahoma City bombing. It was my backyard. I mentioned yesterday, my wife left the building 2 minutes before detonation. We knew people that didn't survive. I'm still privileged to give a lot of talks down at the National Memorial and Museum here in Oklahoma City, and still talk with survivors and victims' families. And just on a personal level, that I would say is the most important to me.
I'm Steve Murphy, DEA Special Agent retired and now host of the Game of Crimes podcast. If you've seen the Netflix series Narcos, then you know my story. I now bring you stories of heroism and bravery from our law enforcement and military heroes, and occasionally from the criminals that they faced. Welcome to Game of Crimes. You came back to the right place. This is part 2 of this week's episode of Game of Crimes with Murph in the morning. Appreciate you folks coming back. And if you listened to yesterday's episode, we were interviewing Barry Black, retired FBI agent, 31 years experience, who was not only an accountant and a fraud investigator and a white-collar crime specialist, but then became a member of the SWAT team for the FBI, then became a sniper for the SWAT team, and that wasn't exciting enough, so he became a bomb technician. I can remember being a kid and almost blowing my fingers off with firecrackers. I mean, being a bomb tech, holy cow, Barry, what's wrong with you, man?
Well, it sounded great. Too many movies, I think.
But you know what? That's what it takes, is somebody with that desire, that heart to do it. Did you ever work undercover narcotics?
No, never did.
And I only did small little undercover things, but it was exciting. And I thought, well, that's what I'm supposed to do, because I watched Miami Vice.
Right.
I wanted those silk shirts and that bling and the long ponytail. Yeah, I'm still waiting on all that stuff. But as we talked yesterday, Barry was telling us about some of the different events that he's participated in. We ended up talking about national special security events, which are potential targets, I guess would be the nice way to say that, Barry, where there's a lot of people, a lot of high-profile people, sporting events, political conventions, that type of thing, where a terrorist, if they were to somehow successfully attack those events, they'd get a lot of media coverage is what they get.
Right. Yeah. High body count, high profile for the media. And we had an event at a college football stadium here in Oklahoma. After transit became hardened in the aftermath of 9/11, our intel globally was that terrorist organizations would try to target shopping malls and concerts and sporting events. And we've seen all of the above. But in 2005, there was a detonation outside the University of Oklahoma's football stadium, and the bomb text inside said, "This is new." Usually, the most common type of device in the United States is a low explosive pipe bomb, but they could tell from it's called the brisance, or the crack of this explosion, that this was high explosives, which is different. So anyway, I went down, worked very closely with the state and local partners there, and it turned out to be something called tristone triperoxide, a hydrogen peroxide-based explosive, which was new in the U.S. and had historically only been used by terrorists overseas. Fortunately, the FBI had just given us training on the existence of this kind of exotic explosive, and this was actually the first time it was used as a main charge in the continental U.S. So you never know what you're going to end up with, but it fit our intel for a terrorist target being a sporting event. The governor was in attendance, some high-profile people, but it turned out to just be kind of a loner, having trouble getting dates, just lost his National Merit Scholarship, and that's where the award ceremony was going to be. Made a kilo or two of this exceptionally sensitive explosive, and it detonated right outside the stadium just before halftime.
Unbelievable. I didn't get, oh my gosh, I didn't get my way, so I'm going to kill a bunch of people because they were better than me.
Well, and the BAU, our behavioral analysis unit, the profilers got involved, and the last thing on his computer, they said, yeah, this is a suicide note, but we can't really tell if he intended to kill anybody else. But factually speaking, at the University of Oklahoma back then, at halftime, you could get what they called a halftime pass out. and you would get a pass to leave the stadium to go stretch your legs, maybe have a cocktail or whatever. And a lot of people congregate right in the area where this detonation occurred, but it happened just minutes before halftime. So, we may never know the true intent, but it was a horrific blast.
There was only one casualty, right?
And that was the bomber, yes.
Yeah. No, I got no problem with that.
Well, as they say, once people are convicted, recidivism is not an issue in those cases.
That's a good way to put it, man. I've never heard anybody say that before. I like that. I'm not above plagiarizing, just so you know. So I might steal what you say here. Which of the bomb cases that you worked? Now, so you not only worked in the United States before I ask this next question, you worked overseas as well, right?
Yes. Again, it was a privilege to do that job just because of the quality and volume of training I received, our FBI bomb techs receive, and the events I had attended. Incident Command Structure, ICS, that you're familiar with, was more of a fire department kind of thing until 9/11. So I would travel abroad to host nations and work on incident command issues for major events, drawing on experience from Waco and the Oklahoma City bombing as sort of object lessons. So I was really fortunate to work with the State Department's Anti-Terrorism Assistance Team, ATA, as well as NATO. I was an instructor for NATO, teaching NATO soldiers sensitive site exploitation, things that I just never dreamed to do, and I had the opportunity to do in my 31 years.
I'll tell you what, that's one of the things I love about being a federal agent. You're going to work your butt off.
Right.
But you get to travel the world.
Yeah. I was fortunate, Murph. I worked on every continent but Antarctica.
Yeah.
And I'm going to try to get down there in retirement. So I'll hit them all.
I have to tell you a story offline about my wife in Antarctica. You'll get a kick out of it.
Love to hear it.
And that's what we get to go speak to the basic agent trainees at the DEA Academy. And at the end, the SAC will ask us, do we have any words of advice for these trainees before they're getting ready to hit the streets? And I'm usually the first to speak. And I just tell them, I'm so jealous of you guys because I know what you're getting ready to go through. And I know the fun you're going to have and the experiences that you're going to have. And it's going to be like, you're going to be doing things that you never dreamt about or you see on TV, but you're going to experience the real thing and travel the world on somebody else's dime. And it's just, I loved it.
It's best job in the world.
Yeah, it was. It was. I think it still is. Just out of curiosity, when you would go overseas, were you in a training capacity or were you actually there investigating bombings?
So usually I was recognized as a master police instructor by the Bureau. So we would mostly go in a training capacity. So for the State Department's Anti-Terrorism Assistance Program, I would go and assess that host nation's capabilities to deter or investigate an act of terrorism. So I'd be working with the local either paramilitary or military units that would handle a terrorism investigation and then write a report recommending what kind of training or equipment they may need to augment their prevention or response. And then, of course, the training with NATO was more teaching warfighters, if you have the time, grab hard drives or these certain things that may have intel value so that we can go a little deeper into the head of the snake, if you will. It was a remarkable career, just the opportunities, nothing I did, just the opportunities I was given. For instance, in the Olympics and in Greece, I was there. So that was in a preventive type of measure. But as you know, we don't have authority overseas. So it was only a couple of places like in Mogadishu and for a period in Greece that we were armed. So we rely on our host nation partners. So it's a partnership 100%.
What were you doing in Mogadishu?
There are problems there, as you know. There are teams that assess the terrorists' ID capabilities. Mm-hmm. And we have a group called TDAC, the Terrorist Explosive Analytical Device Center, which is also located there on Redstone. And we were trying to supplement those teams on the grounds. In other words, what they're finding so that we could develop render safe or counter tools for whatever they were finding there. We see these things exported. I mentioned triestone triperoxide, it made its way from the Middle East. It was used in the London attacks, for instance. So we anticipate it coming west. We just try to stay ahead of the curve. So in Mogadishu, I was working with the teams that were on the ground there to try to identify any kind of unique IED signatures we could go ahead and get trained up on in case we see them here.
Was that before or after the Black Hawk Down incident?
Oh, that was after. Yeah. And it's still a pretty dangerous place. Very shortly after my team left, there was a massive explosion in what you'd think of as the city center, not far outside the compound. It's a dangerous place. It's still a dangerous world.
It is, very much so. Were you involved in the investigation of the bombing of the USS Cole?
No, a very good friend of mine, Morgan Body, was. And I've gotten to speak on a number of occasions with Commander Lippold, who's just an outstanding man.
What about the Marine Corps barracks bombing
in Beirut? That predated me. I was in college when that happened.
Oh, thanks a lot, man. That's all right. I wasn't feeling old enough. Now I'm feeling older.
Well, I teach at a university now, and I asked the students if they remembered this one incident of the bombing of Pan Am 103, and it was in 1988. None of them were born yet, so I know what you mean.
They're probably saying, what's Pan Am?
Yeah, exactly.
What about, so if you guys get a tip there's a bomb and you respond out there, if you find a device, are you personally going to be involved in the examination and the dismantling if it is determined to be a bomb?
It depends on a number of factors. We're qualified and trained to do that. Oftentimes, as I said, there are only a couple of hundred of us in the Bureau at a time. We're usually partnered with some other entity. So I have done what we call a render safe procedure before. But one great thing the FBI affords is training. For instance, I got sent to England and worked with the British Army to learn from their, they call it the Troubles, the vehicle bombs in Northern Ireland. So I would take that training back, and then we would teach our state and locals counter VBID techniques. So it's a lot of training capacity. And then as that weapons of mass destruction piece came on board, a lot of analysis, detection type of techniques. So it's the full gambit, and there's a lot of training time involved.
It sounds like it. And you're literally, even during training, you're risking your life.
Explosives are hazardous, just by definition. Even in training scenarios, a lot of injuries occur. It's just inherently dangerous business.
Is it more productive from an investigative standpoint that when you find a device, if you're able to render it safe, is that more advantageous to the investigation than taking it somewhere, blowing it up, and then examining the contents?
So the latter is called a countercharge, where you just blow it up. I was in Tunisia after the embassy was overrun in the Arab Spring, and they had troubles out west. It was a very interesting place, but the standard operating procedure in some places is just blow it up and get rid of it. Well, if you countercharge that bomb in place, then you're basically just doing the terrorist's job and adding explosives to it. So in a perfect world, the render safe procedure would save the more interesting bits for analysis. You can, depending on the tool you use, I was fortunate to work with our research and development group, and we actually patented a specialized tool for the types of bomb used after the Boston Marathon bombing and then in San Bernardino. So it's a cat and mouse game. But the TDAC group I mentioned before, brilliant scientists, a great deal of analytical capability. So the more you can get to them, the better probability that there'll be some useful intel come out of it.
Excellent. And I got to mention, I meant to mention this yesterday. If the listeners, if you'll look over Barry's shoulder there up on the shelf, you'll see a replica of an old Tommy gun. When I first saw that before we started recording, I'm like, dude, they gave you a Tommy gun?
Those are hard to come by. So that one is a replica, but I'm proud of that up there.
That's pretty cool. That's a nice gift. That was a retirement gift. Is that right?
It was a retirement gift. If they shoved me on out the door, but gave me something cool.
Very nice. We're easy and cheap, aren't we?
Exactly. Yeah. Still need toys though.
Absolutely. That's part of the fun of being in law enforcement. Of all the bomb cases that you worked on, which do you think, in your personal opinion, was the most significant?
Well, to me personally, it was the Oklahoma City bombing. It was my backyard. I mentioned yesterday, my wife left the building 2 minutes before detonation. We knew people that didn't survive. I'm still privileged to give a lot of talks down at the National Memorial and Museum here in Oklahoma City, and still talk with survivors and victims' families. And just on a personal level, that I would say is the most important to me. I went to New York Ground Zero after 9/11. We lost Lenny Hatton was our bomb technician there. He was a great guy, former Marine. He died going into the building to help rescue people when it collapsed. He's a real hero.
Yep.
So, seen some major events, but as they go, knowing people that didn't survive or were immediately personally impacted, it makes it a little bit special, a little different.
Yep. Speaking of 9/11, what was your role there?
Well, Lenny was killed in the aftermath of the attack when the building collapsed. So the Bureau sent 4 of us, special agent bomb technicians, to augment the FBI office out of 26 Fed there in New York. I was on the evidence response team at the time as well. I was stationed at our command post very near Ground Zero to facilitate. If we didn't know exactly what we were getting into. Of course, hindsight's 2020. It was the 2 planes, but if there were other things there of hazardous nature that needed a bomb tech's attention, and we would also support specialized units within New York City, they would run high-risk search warrants in case there were other bombs or IEDs. We were there to support them as well.
Did you? I don't know how to ask this question. Do you suffer from any of the toxins that were in the air there at Ground Zero?
Well, it was several years later, Murph. I was having some significant sinus problems, which most people that were in any of the sites suffered. But I was talking with a specialist, ear, nose, and throat guy, and I said, "Hey, while you're here, what do you think about this little knot, this little bump?" And he goes, "Oh, that's probably just a cyst. I can, cut that out after the sinus surgery heals." So in the office, he started a little procedure, and he made it sound like it would be just like removing a mole, something that wouldn't take long, but he was digging around for quite some time. So I finally said, what's going on? He goes, "I don't know what this is. You need to go see somebody else." So I ended up with the head of otolaryngology at University of Oklahoma, and it turned out to be cancer, a highly rare type of cancer. It took 3 pathologists to figure out what it was. And I ended up having a 6-hour surgical procedure at the base of my jaw. And they took out a golf ball sized tumor that was directly attributable to my exposure there at 9/11. But I'm fortunate. We've lost more first responders to health effects than we lost the day of the attacks. So that was a lingering consequence for sure.
Wow. I didn't mean to get so personal there, but thank you for sharing that story.
Well, it's important people know. And as I said, it's there are a lot of foundations now that consider the ill effects of first responders. And most of us in this job are kind of hard chargers. I really preach PPE to my students now where I teach. But we just had no way to know what was in the air. It was a hellscape. When I arrived, it was still smoking, and recovery efforts were still underway. It was larger in scale than what I'd seen in Oklahoma City, but it reminded me, just the smells, the sights, the sounds, it all kind of dredges up those old memories. But I certainly didn't anticipate being diagnosed with cancer. Grace of God, I'm still here. But as I said, we've lost more first responders to those health effects than we lost victims the day of the attacks.
Do you still have to go for testing every so often?
Every time, yeah. Matter of fact, it's coming up. Yep, that's something I tend to rub some dirt on it and move on. But you hear that word cancer, and that gets your attention. So I'm still seeing folks about that.
There was this was after I was gone, but the FBI SAC of Atlanta passed away several years ago because of the conditions he contracted, I guess, while he was there in New York. I can't remember his name now. He was at my retirement party. He came to my retirement party, presented me a certificate from the FBI director. And it's part of getting old. I just don't remember things the way I used to, it seems like. But never knew. He was the kind of guy who would never tell you that, yeah, I've got this condition, just the hazards that went along with the job, which is really kind of sad.
Well, and I know some of the agents we've lost. I knew them personally. And then the Bureau family as a whole has lost many more. But then you extend that to firefighters and law enforcement that responded to Shanksville and the Pentagon and New York as well. Yes, it's a horrific loss of life.
Yeah. I had just reported to headquarters, the Special Operations Division, about 3 weeks before 9/11. And we were living out in Ashburn, out in Loudoun County next to Dulles Airport. After 9/11, almost all the guys I worked with in my group at SOD were either former New Yorkers that spent time in New York, and they all knew somebody or had family members that suffered because of what happened to the Twin Towers. And I, got the great idea. I was the token Southern boy. Everybody else was from the Northeast up there, so my nickname was General Lee. At least I got promoted. I wasn't, a sergeant or a corporal. But, I said, why don't everybody take some vacation time and let's rent a couple vans and let's go up to New York and we'll be part of the bucket brigade or whatever they need us to do. And our special agent in charge in New York put out an agency-wide teletype that no agents were to respond to New York during that time. I mean, just flat out forbid us to go. And back then, I think I was a GS-14. So, I was being a good soldier and followed orders. But down the road, now you realize that was probably the best advice or command or order that I ever got, because I'm sure it saved a lot of us.
Murph, as you know, incident command, a lot of people will self-deploy, and then you have to figure out who's there, what they can do. So it's hard for those of us that select this as a career not to want to run towards the problem. But incident command kind of dictates you wait for that call to come. I will tell you, one of the heavy equipment operators, civilian heavy equipment operator that helped us in Oklahoma City with debris removal as a contractor, great guy. I was on scene on the site predominantly, so I got to know him. And then years later, 9/11 happens. My cell phone rang, number I didn't recognize, and I'm like you, sadly, some of the names run together. And he said his name, and I said, I'm sorry, you're going to have to tell me. He said, I was that heavy equipment operator. If you need me and my people in New York, you tell me and we'll show up.
Wow.
So that's the kind of national support these events do bring out. And it seems sometimes the nation gets divided, but it's a nation full of good people. And I thought that was really telling. All those years, he still had my number, and Johnny on the spot, willing to volunteer his time.
It's a shame that we have to go through a national disaster like that to galvanize our country to be one group of people again, rather than different factions. And I mean, heck, nowadays you can't have a difference of opinion without somebody hating you because you don't believe the way they think. It amazes me what's going on in this country right now.
Strange times.
But, at the same token, I think back to when my parents were around and I was young, and I remember them saying the same thing. Well, what's that long hair about? You can't have long hair. Like, boys don't have long hair.
It's funny. I mentioned Roy Foreman, my training agent, when we spoke before. He was hired by J. Edgar Hoover. And when he retired, he said, I don't recognize the FBI anymore. It's time for me to go. Yeah. And of course, I was brand new. And I thought, what do you mean? This is awesome. Well, after 31 years, I could kind of say the same thing. So, yeah, it's very little is new under the sun, as they say.
I don't want to get too deep in the weeds with personalities within the Bureau, but within the bomb technicians section, you guys are a very elite group. You're a small group, and all the 12,000 agents that the Bureau has. Are your supervisors, were they bomb techs?
Usually. Yeah, it's a unique position, and it's kind of, why are you training for some event that probably will never happen? Well, that's what you can think before Oklahoma City or before 9/11. So you have to be prepared for the unexpected. So there's a great deal of training, and our unit at headquarters is designed for that. Once we took on the weapons of mass destruction in its totality, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, there's a lot of training involved. Mm-hmm. And our upper management was generally very, very supportive, because the consequence of not handling something like that correctly can be horrific.
I believe you said you did that for 26 years. Is that right?
Right. I was in the Bureau for 31, was on the SWAT team for about 7. Around 4 of that was a sniper, but I was a bomb tech for the FBI 26 years.
So in 26 years, ballpark figure, how many call outs did you go on, whether they were domestic or international?
I probably should know that number, but nobody's ever asked me, and I've never thought about it. Domestically, Oklahoma is a large state with a lot of it's called Indian country, so it's a federal response. So with the Indian country calls, domestic calls here, we've had a couple of threats at the new federal building. I would say it's triple digits in those 26 years, domestically and internationally.
Way too many, right?
Well, a lot of them are hoaxes, but you don't know till you know, and you have to treat them like they're real until you know they're not. So it's a time-consuming endeavor. But again, the caliber and quality of training the FBI provides and our state and locals receive is really first class.
Percentage-wise of the actual cases that do involve legitimate explosives, what's the percentage you think are actually solved?
If we're talking about federal cases, I would say the majority of them. The resources available are really spectacular, and we call it the CSI effect. People watch a lot of TV and think things should be solved in 60 minutes, and that's just not the case. I was asked to testify as an expert before Congress about the January 6th devices. 2 devices recovered about the time the Capitol was being overrun, and some people thought that the culprit hadn't been arrested soon enough. And I recall telling the subcommittee, these take time. It's not going to be in an hour. There's not always fingerprints. There's not always DNA or facial recognition. But I said, given enough time and resources developed or put on the case, somebody would be caught. And it wasn't long thereafter somebody was caught. So the plan works, but it just takes a little longer than a lot of people want to spend.
Yeah, I remember reading that in the last chapter of your book, and I started laughing. This is not TV. This is not CSI. We're not going to solve it in 60 minutes.
Well, and I have faith in our brothers and sisters that do the job, whether it's law enforcement or our military partners abroad, exceptionally well trained and exceptionally motivated, and they'll get the job done. But it just takes time.
Yeah. You mentioned too about coming up with a patent, and you may have already answered this question, but I just want to make sure. It sounds like the Bureau was receptive if you guys came up with an idea or a new tool. I think you said you guys got a patented tool to help you with those events, or an investigative technique. They would support that, right?
Oh, absolutely. Technology changes, particularly now. We're in the 21st century. You and I remember the last century. But yeah, after the Boston bombings, of course, there were pressure cooker devices at the finish line. But then as that manhunt played out, there were some unique types of pipe bombs that were deployed that were really, I will say, designed to defeat our standard render safe tools. Well, it's that cat and mouse game. Then we saw those same types of devices used in the San Bernardino attacks after the Boston event. So it was clear this was going to be a new problem. So I was very fortunate to work with our scientists in our research and development unit to develop a tool specifically designed to defeat those types of devices. So once it was developed, we tested it down in the plains of Texas, and we built dozens and dozens of really highly sensitive devices in their most sensitive configuration so we could document the results scientifically. And this was a highly effective tool. We received a patent for it. I didn't do much, but they were kind enough to add me to the patent. And we gave that patent to the Bureau, and now the tool is being used by law enforcement and military.
Wow. I don't know if you can even talk about it, but is that something you could disclose? What was it different about those pipe bombs in Boston?
So basically, if you imagine a galvanized steel pipe with threads on each end, you fill that. Don't try this at home. I mean, but
right.
Basically you fill it with some energetic material, then you screw on some end caps, and there's your device. Well, the devices used in these other events were not straight pieces of pipe and did not have external end caps. So that threw a bit of a wrinkle in our standard render safe procedure. So it required a new approach, a better mousetrap, if you will. And some of the brilliant PhDs I was privileged to work with had some ideas, and we all spitballed it, came out to a very effective tool.
Wow. And I'm so ignorant on the subject. I'm trying to picture in my mind what you're describing, but I don't understand how the pipe could not have end caps.
There are internal end caps and external end caps.
Gotcha. All right. And we're not trying to teach you folks how to build bombs out there, so we're not going to talk about that anymore. Can you discuss a little bit about, because you said there's always plans in place, but can you discuss the rare instances where, I mean, we all know the plan's great until it hits fan, and then the plan kind of goes out the window. But you've got to make decisions on the spot. And a lot of times those are life or death decisions. And you're actually varying from your standard operating procedures. How is that received? And is that studied by internal affairs or OPR? Or how do you guys handle that within the Bureau?
So it comes down to trust in your training, trust in your experience. And I was privileged to be named as a master bomb technician with the Bureau. And that truly was just a function of exposure to this rare series of events and the amount of training over 26 years. I was on one investigation. It was the TATP event, that triacetone triperoxide event. And my SAC showed up. It was sunrise. And he said, well, what do you think? I said, well, I think this is TATP, something that's never been used before as a main charge in the country. And the plan in place is to fly out our PhD chemists who are experts in this, and then they handle it from there. And he just looked at me and he goes, well, you make your recommendation, which, as you know, is federal speak for if you mess it up, you're going to Minot. So I said, well, that's what I think it is. And I said, I need you to contact the aviation unit and free up an aircraft. I've already called the chemists. Dr. Kirk Yeager, great guy. He was the preeminent expert on TATP. So I called Kirk at, it was about 6 a.m. East Coast time. I said, I think we've got a significant amount of this material. Aviation unit's already waiting on you. So he and another chemist flew out. And I felt good about my recommendation, but I felt a whole lot better once he said, this is definitely high grade TATP. So I didn't get moved to the desert.
What if it was a suspected nuclear device? Would you roll on that?
Oh, yes. We have the WMD response and the mission to stabilize those. There are very deep bench assets available. The render safe for an unconventional weapon like that is obviously very complex, but there are teams and in place to take logical steps for things to go well. And those are exercised quite frequently with some very highly qualified individuals. Yeah, it's comforting to know the plans are in place. I had one instant where we actually had to do, we call it making the call. And you never want to be that guy because what if you're wrong? But there was an odd case down outside of Fort Sill, which is a significant military installation. This was after the Fort Hood attacks. And our tests showed what appeared to be CX, which is phosgenoxime. It's a chemical warfare agent. Well, there's a plan in place, and you start little and go big. But a PhD chemist ran the tests, and they said the tools are telling us this is this chemical warfare agent. Well, they're field tests, which are designed to err on the side of caution. So we made the call, and the team came out just as planned, did their thing, and it turns out it was not CX. The guy was trying to make his own hallucinogen, so it was a bizarre cocktail of chemicals, but it wasn't a nerve agent. Things turned out all right. He's still in jail. But I had to exercise that plan once for an unconventional weapon, and it worked flawlessly.
Holy cow. Was your wife aware of all the things you were doing?
Generally. The phone rang in the middle of the night. My son, when he was born, he would say, well, I know you're leaving. And he turned out to be a great kid. But you've done this kind of work. You don't necessarily discuss what you're doing. Just, I'm going to be gone for a while. And my wife and son were good not to press too hard.
Yeah. Yeah, I tell you what, those people that support us are golden.
Absolutely.
I like to. I'm not kidding. I was going to start to say I usually kid around about this, but I'm not really not kidding that we all marry up.
Oh, for sure, I did. Yeah.
So 2019 rolls around, and you decide you're going to pull the pin. Why was that?
Well, as you know, we are of a mandatory retirement age of 57, and I was eligible to go at age 49. I had 25 years in then, which made me eligible, but I loved my work too much. But I was getting a little older, bones were creaking a little bit, and it was just time. All of the older guys before me had said, "You'll know when it's time." And I was working for the children of my contemporaries. That's one thing that really made me realize I was, in fact, a dinosaur. A couple of incidents occurred, and I showed up to do my little part. And the headquarters supervisor, I said, "Hey, I knew an agent with that name." He goes, "Oh, that was my dad." And they started calling me sir, which it just makes you feel old. I was offered an extension to stay later, but it was time to go. And you want to leave while you still love the work. And I still loved every second of it.
And that's a good point to make. You don't want to leave when you're disgruntled.
For sure.
It seems like in law enforcement, we tend to remember the bad things about people anyway. So it's nice to go out on a positive note.
Right. No, it was great. It was just time, and everything worked out well. I was fortunate to spend my entire career in one office without having to move my family. We've settled home. We love our neighbors. We're a little active in our church. So it was time to just settle down. And I planned on just learning to fish or play golf or something, but I ended up teaching at a local university, and life's good.
Yeah. What, just out of curiosity, what surprised you most about retirement, if anything?
The fact that I could turn my cell phone off. I never saw that off button before. So, just the fact that I didn't have to set an alarm anymore, wasn't going to get called out in the middle of the night. Not that I didn't enjoy those cases, but it took me a little while to realize I can just turn this thing off and don't have to be anywhere. It was sort of a nice change.
You've been running and gunning for 31 years. All of a sudden, you don't get those phone calls anymore. Yeah. Did you have to go through a transition period there?
It was like being on a hamster wheel. You're used to running. Yes, it took some time. I'm thankful the Forensic Science Institute over at the University of Central Oklahoma had begun a forensic science program, and some retired agents were there that I knew from the laboratory and some other places, and I got offered to take up some teaching there. And I wasn't sure university instruction was going to be for me. I was used to teaching soldiers and cops, and college students are a little different, but they let me pick my days and hours, so I don't have a class before lunchtime, and it worked out really well. And I've been there, I think, since retirement, and I really enjoy it. I enjoy the students. I enjoy the curriculum.
Wow! And what's the class you teach?
Forensic investigation of mass disasters is one, and then basically crime scene processing, a CSI kind of stuff.
Wow. The first one sounds like a master's level class.
I have some postgrad students in every now and then. Yeah, I enjoy it. It's what I did for 3 decades, and it's a secondary degree program for these students. They want to be there. They're motivated, and are going to end up in these types of jobs. So I'm happy to do it.
Yep. So I'll ask you a personal question here, and if you're not comfortable answering it, I completely understand. You saw a lot of things that never go away, that never leave your mind's eye. Anybody that's really out there ever done the job has experienced this as well. Law enforcement pretty much in general. But you've probably seen it to an extent that a lot of people haven't, not just here in the United States, but around the world. So do you have periods of anxiety or depression, or do you think that you have any episodes with PTSD?
PTSD is a real thing. And I think any of us that have been through these events are going to have some effects. You can't see these types of things and just move on. I've told some people it's like another brick in your backpack. Each one adds a little weight, and each is unique. I'm sure you've seen some tough things, and I'm certain I have. I tell people we just have to have a way to deal with that, whether it's faith or family or friends. We tend to, in our industry, insulate ourselves and only spend time with people like us. I've found it's better to branch out a little bit because you can remember there's a bigger world out there. But I just try to find the good in folks. These things, you can't unsee them. There's evil out there. but there are folks that can combat it. But once you see it, you can't unsee it, but you just have to find a way that works for you to process through it. I tell these students, alcohol and drugs don't work. You can't go home and kick the dog. You have to have something outside that work that'll take the edge off.
Right. And I haven't mentioned this on the podcast in a while, but if anybody's suffering through anxiety or depression or what you might consider PTSD, and you're having thoughts of suicide and you need somebody to talk to, there's a national crisis hotline here in the United States. Just dial 988. There's somebody there 24/7, 365. They speak multiple languages. They're probably not the people that will counsel you, but they will put you in touch with professionals so that you can get the help you need. You don't have to go it alone. If you're having those thoughts, please, 988. That's all you got to do. Just dial 988. And I believe you can even text it now. So
and we've lost a lot of people. Military. I was happy to work closely with military. And once you finish some of these kind of adrenaline type jobs and go back to working at a hardware store, it's tough to adjust. There's help out there, and no shame in getting help.
Absolutely. When you and I were coming up through the ranks, it was, if you asked for a counselor, you were considered weak.
Right.
And you were afraid it was going to be detrimental to your career. What a stupid way to think.
Well, in the old days, people would crimp blasting caps with their teeth. And if you didn't do that, you weren't a real man. I was like, yeah. So I'm going to use a crimping tool. I'm not going to bite a blasting cap. So you just have to make up your own mind.
Well, looking back in your career, if you had it to do all over again, is there anything that you would have done differently?
Murph, I wouldn't have changed a thing. I was so fortunate to get to do the things I got to do. I was fortunate to get in the Bureau. As I said, that was a childhood dream. But then once I was in, there are so many avenues, but you have to pursue them. You got to do the work. Nothing's free in this life. But I was just very fortunate to be able to meet and work with the highest caliber of people I could have imagined.
Yep. So in retirement, you decided to write a book. How did that all come about?
Well, as I said, I'd wanted to be an agent since I was a little boy, and all my friends knew it. I knew who wanted to be a jet pilot and who wanted to be a rock star. So they knew I wanted to get in the FBI. And when I got my letter, one of my childhood friends, she said, "Look, I know you too well. You're going to forget everything. So start writing it down." And I did. You'll remember the little green federal notebooks we all got. Yeah. They were little 4x4-inch notebooks. I always had that with me. And when I was flying back from some, Uzbekistan or someplace, I had a lot of time on a plane, and I would just jot down, what we were doing there, while we were there, anything strange foods. I'd never eaten a guinea pig until I went to Peru. So, we don't have that in Alabama.
Yeah.
So just the odd little stories, and when I retired, I thought, maybe my son, or if he has kids one day, his kids might be interested in what the old guy did. So I had some free time, strung them together in kind of a chronology, but then I didn't know what to do with it. I'd never really pursued that type of publication. But one evening, I was contacted by McFarland and Company to write a forensic science textbook. And I said, well, that sounds kind of hard. And I'm retired. I don't know if I want to bite that off right now. We might do it one day. But I do have this compilation of stories from the Bureau. And they said, well, it sounds interesting. Send us a couple. So I did. And time went by and I heard nothing. I thought, well, that's kind of what I figured. But eventually they recontacted me. Do you have any more like that? And I said, sure. So I sent them some more. And over time, they said, hey, we think we'd like to publish this. So they sent me a contract, and this will be the first time I said it, but now I'm an author. So,
hey, all right.
Yeah, it's hard to believe. It, again, just fell in my lap. It's a real blessing.
Well, and I'm glad you said it here on Game of Crimes, because I'm calling that as an exclusive.
You've got the scoop, Murph.
That's right. You mentioned to us that you're a professor at the University of Central Oklahoma. Any other future plans? What do you see for Barry Black a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now?
Well, I hope I'm around 10 years from now. That's a pretty long window. I love it here in Oklahoma. This is home. I've been here now longer than where I grew up in Birmingham. I enjoy teaching. This book is kind of a new hobby. I'm spending some time doing some book signings here and there, and I do some speaking engagements as well. So if I could continue to do that, stay put, Not a heavy lifter anymore. My bones are aching and I'm getting a little older, but I enjoy teaching and speaking, and that would be ideal for me.
Excellent. And so for those of you that are listening to this, not watching on YouTube because you didn't go over to YouTube and subscribe like I asked you to, and I would appreciate if you go do that. Our numbers are growing. We broke 2,500, believe it or not. I know that's not big for most people, but hey, for Game of Crimes, that's huge. But the book we're talking about is Hazardous Devices, Memoir of an FBI Bomb Technician, Accountant, and Sniper by Barry T. Black. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it at Barnes & Noble. I believe you said you could find it at Walmart. You'll be able to find it on Barry's website, which is barryblackokc.com. You'll be able to find it, the link, at gameofcrimespodcast.com, because I'll post his link up there as well. Anybody that's been a guest on the show that has a book, some of you have lots of books, but I'll post at least one of your books on the website, so you can always find them there. Truly, I encourage you, if you're interested in what the Bureau does, some of the complexities of the job categories within the Bureau. It's funny, you listen to Barry talk here. He's been an agent for a couple of years and didn't even know that the FBI had bomb technicians. I didn't either, so I'm not giving him a hard time about it. But take a read. You wrote it in a way, Barry, that there's action. For me, I get bored real easy reading books. I've read so many books doing this podcast. I didn't read this much in college.
Right. Sure.
But it is a very, very good read. So I highly encourage it. I want to mention a few things I found out about Barry here. He's received quite a few awards in his career. I don't know about all the FBI awards. Is there any particular awards in the Bureau that you received, Barry, that you're more proud of than others, an administrator's award or anything like that?
Oh, I was fortunate to receive letters of commendation from every director I'd worked for. A group, it's called the Group Achievement Award for the federal law enforcement officers for a last case I helped with. A guy wanted to blow up another building in Oklahoma City. We were able to stop that. And the Bureau's a family. Those are meaningful, but some of those little bit of recognition from outside the Bureau, I think may mean even more, because, I spent a great deal of time outside the Bureau, state and local partners, military, State Department. So yeah, I was very fortunate. Of course, you don't do this kind of thing for recognition anyway.
Right. But you skipped over a few things there. You're voted as a member of the Oklahoma Law Enforcement Hall of Fame.
That was quite an honor. I think there are only a couple of FBI agents in the Hall of Fame because it's a state organization. Mm-hmm. It's state and local, but my state and local partners nominated me and voted me in, and that was really a terrific honor.
What about the Bill? Is it Thigman Public Service Award?
Bill Tillman, yeah. So it was Public Service Award. If you go back to history, he was an iconic figure in Oklahoma law enforcement back in the Wild West days. And that came as a function of being in the State Hall of Fame. Is very humbling.
And you're an honorary U.S. Air Force commander?
Yes. Yeah. I'm happy to say I worked very closely with military EOD and their explosive detection K9s, counter-narcotic K9s. I put together a flight program in the Second Gulf War. We were deploying K9 assets via helicopter, but a lot of them had not been acclimated to flight. So I wrote an MOU with the Oklahoma National Guard as a helicopter outfit near here, and fee-free, because they were flying these operational flights anyway, was able to get the military working dogs and their veterinarians on board for Nap of the Earth flight and combat simulation flights. And it was an honor to work with the military, and it was very humbling to be named an honorary U.S. Air Force commander.
I've never heard of that. I guess that's like being named a Kentucky colonel.
It was similar, except without the bourbon. Yeah.
I was going to mention that. Well, we're coming up on the end here, Barry, and I've got one final question for you, which I present to all our guests here on the show on the Game of Crimes. And that is, what words of advice do you have for anybody who's considering or even thinking about potentially becoming an agent or an employee of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, or going into law enforcement or the military or any high-risk occupation? Any words you want to leave us with?
Well, every job you just mentioned is a public service job. It's a servant's heart. Those jobs have to be done. There's no mandatory service here in this country. So it's all volunteer. But I would just say follow your heart, aim high. You're not going to get far if you don't put in the hard work, right? But set your goals, set them high, and they're achievable if you're willing to sometimes wait your turn, but put in the hard work up front and good things happen.
All right. Very good. I like what you said about those public servant awards. A lot of people look at that title of being a public servant as a derogatory term, and I don't. I look at that as a badge of honor. I think you do too. There's no higher calling than serving your fellow man. And I try to be nice about it, but sometimes the smart aleck side comes out. And when people do that, I just want to ask them, what have you done to serve your country? What have you done for the citizens of the United States?
Well, and some of the detractors, when they need help, they don't mind calling those first responders. So, sometimes there's just a little hypocrisy there. You got to have your heart in the right place, I think.
Absolutely. So, guys, if y'all want to find out more about Mr. Barry Black here, his website, again, is barryblackokc.com. You can find him on LinkedIn at Barry Black. And that's about the only place you can find him.
I'm not smart enough to be on Instagram or Facebook, so.
But if you go to YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, I think maybe even TikTok, I think I saw some interviews of you over there. A lot of the interviews he's done with other podcasts that want to be as good as Game of Crimes, they've gotten him on the show and posted him over there, and I'm going to do it too. And again, his book, Hazardous Materials of an FBI bomb technician, accountant, and sniper. Barry, it's been a true honor to have you on the show, sir. I appreciate your openness to talk about things, especially, the medical situations from 9/11 and things like that. That's really personal stuff that, a lot of people are not comfortable talking about. And sometimes I'm hesitant to ask the question, but I really do appreciate your transparency and giving us your time today.
Well, it's my pleasure, Murph. It's always good to talk with you, and I hope we'll stay in touch.
Absolutely. And ladies and gentlemen, you're looking at, if you're watching this and if you're just listening, that's a true American hero. That's a man who offered his life to protect his country, and we call that a patriot.
Oh, you're very kind. Thank you.
Well, it is a true honor. So, guys, thanks all again for coming back. We'll have another great guest next week, but love you folks continue to come back. Somebody gave me a hard time recently about what I'm getting ready to say, and it's the way I ended every show. And so I'm debating on whether I should continue saying this. So you let me know what you think. And that is, why do you continue to come back here? It's because you enjoy playing the biggest, the baddest, the most dangerous game of all, and that's our Game of Crimes. God bless. See you next week.